is being recorded. At this time, for opening remarks and introductions, I'd like to turn the conference over to Eddie Model, Manager of Communications for Fox Sports Media Group. Please go ahead, sir.
Thanks, Blake. Hi, everyone, and good afternoon from New York. We appreciate you joining us today. Here to preview this Saturday night's bouts are UFC President Dana White, Fox Sports Media Group Co-President and Executive Producer Eric Shanks, UFC on Fox host Kurt Menefee, who will be joining us shortly, and UFC on Fox analyst and current fighter Brian Stann. The UFC on Fox once again invades prime time with a 2-hour quadruple header this Saturday, May 5th, live from the IZOD Center in East Rutherford, New Jersey. Our coverage starts at 8 p.m. Eastern. Fox Sports' Kurt Menefee will kick off the night, hosting pre- and post-fight coverage alongside UFC Hall of Famer Randy Couture and UFC middleweight fighter Brian Stann, who is quickly becoming a fan favorite both inside and outside of the octagon. As some of you know, Stann is a former Marine whose leadership, character, and endurance in the face of extreme danger earned him a Silver Star. Stann is the president of Hire Heroes USA, which is an organization dedicated to creating job opportunities for veterans and their spouses. Brian, on behalf of Fox Sports, we're so proud to have you and honored that you'll be part of our coverage this Saturday. Tonight's main event features two of the most exciting 155-pounders in the world as lightweight contenders Nate Diaz and Jim Miller battle 5 rounds to get one step closer to a coveted title shot. The remaining main card bouts include welterweight contenders Josh Koscheck versus Johnny Hendricks, middleweights Usman Paredes, who takes on Alan Belcher, and heavyweights Pat Barry versus LeVar Johnson. One last time before we get to your questions, once again, Fox Sports Media Group is the premier destination for UFC programming, and here's why. Coverage leading up to what will be an exciting night of fighting begins with Thursday's press conference, streamed live on foxsports.com at 2 p.m. Eastern. On Friday, Fuel TV, as well as foxsports.com, airs the UFC weigh-in beginning at 4 p.m. Eastern. And then on Saturday, Fuel TV and Fox Deportes broadcast preliminary bouts starting at 5 p.m. Saturday night's main event is carried on Fox, but also airs on Fox Deportes and Fox Sports Radio. Additional post-fight coverage picks up at 10 p.m. Eastern on Fuel and Fox Sports Radio with MMA expert Larry Pepe. With that said, Blake, let's turn this call over to some questions. Thanks.
Certainly. At this time, if you would like to ask a question, please press star and then 1 on your telephone. If you need to withdraw at any time, you can press the pound key. Again, please press star and 1 if you'd like to ask a question. First, we'll go to the side of Oregon with USA Today. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. So if I could start with Dana, please. Dana, on paper, this looks like the best Fox card so far, the most exciting fight to date. Can you talk about the process of picking fights to be on Fox versus pay-per-view fights? Are you looking for any particular type of fights to put on network television?
Just obviously we want to put exciting fights on network television, but it depends on where we, as we're building cards, guys that aren't injured, guys that are coming off injuries, guys that are ready to fight again, whatever the deal may be, it doesn't matter. We try to line up. We would put the type of fights on Fox that we would put on pay-per-view.
Fair enough. Thank you, Dana. And if I could ask Mr. Shanks, please. Eric, obviously there's 4 fights this time around. Can you talk about the decision to expand to bring 4 fights to the main card this time? And is that the new format, or are you still kind of tinkering with that process?
Yeah, I think it's a mutual work in progress. We don't make the format exclusively. We work with Dana and his team, and as you can tell, we've tried a couple of different things, and we just want to make sure that we end up the right format going forward. We did 1 fight, then we did 2 fights, and I think as we all sat and watched, the broadcast back, I think we all believe that we could put more action into the 2 hours, and we believe that that's what UFC fans want is action along with a bit of context and storytelling for the fighters. So we hope that this kind of maximizes the action, but also leaves us a little bit of time to tell the story of the fighters too. So we have high hopes for this format.
And I'm curious, I don't know if you can speak on this or not, but I believe this time around there's a couple of dark matches on the preliminary card. 6 of the 8 are being shown on Fuel TV. Can you talk about at all the reason for that? Do you know why the decision was made not to air every fight in some form on one of your networks?
You know what? I actually don't know.
That was a time issue. When they time these things out, for instance, I'll give you an example. Going into the Fox card right now, our format is 35 minutes over. And even last night, the last time we did this pay-per-view, I told you guys I added another fight on, and our production guys were freaking out. And fortunately, some fights stopped early, so we were able to put more. We're always trying to cram more fights in. These 2 dark matches could end up sliding into a slot on Fox too. Like he said, we want this whole thing is a work in progress, and we're trying to keep the same format that the UFC has always given the fans, as in as many fights as we can give you, but telling a story on Fox. We're reaching a bigger audience. We're reaching people that have never seen the UFC before. So we kind of have to lay this thing out, and the big Fox cards are more of an education process than the fights on Fuel or FX.
Great, thanks, Dan. And just one final question for Eric, if I could. What now, 3 fights in, is the reaction like among advertisers? Is this an easy sell now, or is this still kind of an educational time for blue chip sponsors and MMA?
It becomes an easier sell every time the numbers prove themselves, whether it's on FX or Fuel or Deportes or the broadcast network. It does get easier and easier. I think that there's still, honestly, here's one of the issues. Is this product is really efficient at reaching the exact right demo, and it's not cheap to buy in. It's not a cheap CPM. So people are actually kind of coming to grips with the fact that for the first time on broadcast television, you've got this really efficient way to reach the exact right demo, and people are coming to grips with the pricing, I think.
Great. Thank you both, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Next, we'll go to the side of Brian Cantor from Headline Planet. Please go ahead.
Question's actually for Brian. So obviously you've had the pleasure of seeing 2 previous Fox broadcasts. You've seen the various fighters kind of contribute as analysts. I'm wondering if there's any points that you feel need to be improved, and why you're going to be the guy this weekend to actually make those improvements and really strengthen the analyst side of the broadcast.
Well, I don't know if I can speak to anybody else's performance prior to mine. I think I was fortunate to get selected for this position because the people at Fox and the people at the UFC trust me to always do my homework. And then there's just a level of comfort as well. It's not easy to sit in front of a camera and all of a sudden, while we're at the desk, there's people talking in our ear and there's spontaneous things coming up that we need to think quickly and be able to speak to the camera comfortably and confidently about it. And, Fox and the UFC knows I'm always going to come to that desk. I'm going to have done my homework because I'm a student of the game. I'm going to know all the fighters and the fights that are on the card. And then I'm fortunate that I've been born with the ability that I can think quick enough, and I don't really flip out in front of the camera. So I'm lucky. I got lucky to get discovered, lucky to do the job. And, I think for me, I don't think it's anywhere near just my job. I've got to go out there and perform this weekend so that I can get invited back to do it.
And just to jump in there, this guy's far from lucky. He's an absolute stud. He's great at what he does. He didn't slide into the spot because he's lucky. Everything that comes out of this guy's mouth is a home run. He's very intelligent, articulate, and like he said, knows the fight game inside and out. We're so pumped to have him as one of the analysts for us now.
And I can also add, Brian's a natural. You heard it right there in his answer, that he is a gifted speaker. He's just a natural in front of the camera. This guy is, he can go into the war record and everything on All-American Hero. And I think that he is everything that, one would think an All-American Hero would be. And I think he shows that when he's on camera. But I also think, we have to remember, here's a guy in Brian who's done some stuff, for the UFC on Fuel, and he's done broadcast television before, so it's not like he's a neophyte. I think that Brock Lesnar did a great job. I think John Jones did a great job. But both those guys were in situations also where they hadn't done television before, particularly Jones. And as Brian mentioned, there's a lot that goes on. So, I think that you get somebody who's a little bit more experienced at television in Brian than you did the first 2. And I think the first 2 did a good job, but I don't think it's a comparison between what they did and what he's going to do, because I think he's just a guy who is naturally gifted at doing this.
And then another question, this would either go to Dana or Eric. So I don't expect you to give specifics, but obviously, as has been said, clearly this looks to be the most exciting card on paper, but it's also probably the least marquee card you've offered on Fox thus far. I'm wondering what expectations are ratings-wise. Are you expecting it to perform as well, better than the last show, or do you think there will be a little bit of a drop-off given that you don't have one of your super high-profile main event names headlining it?
Well, I would disagree with you, actually. Yeah, we don't have the heavyweight title up for grabs on this card, but Nate Diaz just came off an incredible fight with Donald Cerrone. You got Jim Miller, who was getting, it looked like he was going to get finished by Gallard, and he ends up pulling out a submission win. The Johnny Hendricks-Josh Koscheck fight is an incredible fight, and both you take the main event and the co-main event, they're very important fights in both of those divisions. I think these are high. Yeah, they're not the heavyweight title, but these are big fights. They're exciting fights, and like you said, on paper, they look very exciting. For instance, we go on at 8 o'clock with the two heavyweights that I do not see going the distance. I think it's going to be an awesome card.
That was Dana channeling me.
All right, thanks a lot, guys.
And once again, please press star and 1 on your telephone if you'd like to ask a question. Next, we'll go to the site of Sergio Non from USA Today. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time today. A question for Dana. Nate Diaz said last week he was told that a title shot would go to the winner of their fight. Is that a given then, or?
Yeah, well, we're in one of those situations that we were in before with Davis and Evans. Should Diaz win, Diaz is definitely getting a title shot. Should Miller win, Miller's probably going to be a fight or two away.
Okay. And how about with Johnny and Josh? If Johnny wins, does he get one then, and maybe not for Josh, or how does that work?
Exactly. I would definitely agree with that, too. Yep.
Okay. And a question for Brian. Since you are a middleweight, I was wondering if you could break down the Belcher-Palhares fight for us since it's in your division.
Sure, absolutely. Everybody has a fear, and there's this aura around Rousimar Palhares, and he obviously deserves it. He's a very unique athlete, and he's very, very good with his submissions from multiple setups. I mean, I've seen this guy hit leg locks where he's pushing a guy against the cage and then rolls down into him, or what he did to Mesenzio. And so I think a lot of guys are really afraid to fight him. However, I don't think people realize how good Alan Belcher's jiu-jitsu is, and the fact that if you watch the Dan Miller versus Palhares fight, Dan Miller just went out there and fought him. He wasn't afraid, and it was a very, very exciting and compelling fight. And so I think the thought process where people believe that this is a fight for Palhares to win or lose, I think people are forgetting just how good Alan Belcher is, and I think this could actually be the most exciting fight on the card. You're going to see knockdowns, you're going to see almost finishes, you're going to see submission attempts, you're going to see takedowns, head kicks. Both of these guys continue to evolve, but I think this is really going to come down to, does Alan Belcher use his movement, or does he stand in front of Palhares and play his game? I think if Alan Belcher can move, and move well, and move early, he reduces the ability for Rousimar Palhares to get it to the mat and take away one of his legs.
And one more question for you, Brian, as well. There's been a lot of praise for you as an analyst so far. Do you see that as a full-time gig for you at some point? Or?
Oh, I'd love to do that after fighting, and I certainly enjoy doing it during fighting. I mean, the great thing about traveling to the UFC event is I can train the entire time. I've already got training locked down with Frankie Edgar and some of the guy at Henzo's when I get to New York tomorrow afternoon. And so I love doing it, but my first priority right now is a fighter. And obviously, with the next fight I got coming up, it's, one of the biggest fights in my career, and it's an amazing opportunity for me. So as much as I love being an analyst, there's something I love doing a whole lot more, and that's being in the cage competing.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And once again, please press star and 1 if you'd like to ask a question. Next, we'll go to the site of Damon Martin from MMAWeekly.com. Please go ahead.
First question I'll ask is to Eric Shanks. I know from the very first conference call you guys did with the UFC on Fox, you didn't want to talk about ratings, but I just want to ask the overall impression. How impressed have you guys been with the ratings overall for the Fox shows, and maybe just for the whole network of shows since the UFC's come on board?
I continue to be amazed at a sport that, really 10 years ago, you guys all know where it came from 10 years ago, and the fact that, the first time on broadcast television, almost 6 million viewers. The second one, in that demo of 18 to 49, we beat all three networks combined in that demo. FX, the prelims on FX have already beaten 25 out of the 26 prelims on Spike. So it's amazing. Fuel is an even bigger story, obviously. I mean, ratings every week, every month, the UFC content, sets ratings records. We've doubled the ratings on Fuel since UFC's been on it, and I think that, what you'll see on Fuel, and a big reason for this partnership is that UFC will be the reason that Fuel is going to be available to more people, and that's the goal, is to get more UFC fans Fuel availability. So, we don't make ratings predictions ever. That's a tough one to do, but this is a powerhouse across everything, even including Deportes. Deportes, for that first fight of Dos Santos, it set a record for the highest rated Spanish language fight, boxing, UFC, wrestling, anything on Deportes that night. So I don't know if you could say anything, there's nothing bad to say about the performance of UFC on any of the channels.
Excellent. And a question for Dana. You kind of alluded to it earlier with the matchmaking on this card. It seems like when you look at the 4 fights that are on here, it's almost like you're playing the odds, that you've got 4 really exciting matchups. Not that you can ever predict how the fights are going to go. You can put the 2 best guys in the world in there, and it could be a great fight or it could be a boring fight. But do you feel like you cut down the odds a little bit with these matchups, that you're going to have at least a couple, possibilities of a Griffin Bonner type situation, a great, knockdown, drag-out fight?
That's always the position I'm in, and always the situation that we're looking at, whether it's a pay-per-view, a Fox card, or whatever it is. Obviously, I'm psychotic about exciting fights. And if you'd have told me before the heavyweight title match that it would be a one-punch knockout, I would have never believed it. I thought it would have been more of a war. You never know what's going to happen. But yeah, the one thing that I've always believed is, because we stack the cards with so many fights, you're guaranteed to get a couple of great fights, or those what I call holy shit moments. And yeah, I think now that we have 4 great fights on the card, I mean, Pat Barry and LeVar Johnson, like I said, first fight on the card, I don't expect that to go to a decision. The Belcher Paul Harris fight, I don't expect that to go to a decision. Hendricks Koscheck, who knows? Either way, I think that's going to be a great fight. That fight could be a war. They both have great wrestling, and both have knockout power. And then you got Nate Diaz and Jim Miller. That could go I can guarantee you that if that fight goes 1 round or goes 5, people will not be disappointed. That will be a war.
And my last question for you, Dana, would be, you talked about the storytelling part being so important of the Fox cards. Has there been any thought given, you always mention it comes down to timing, injuries, things like that, but repeat performances, and what I mean by that is guys that will be on multiple Fox cards to kind of tell that story that people are asking to see them on Fox cards again? Has that been given any thought, or is it really just about the best matchups you can put on there?
Yeah, it's the best matchups at the time, and the most important matchups that make sense, that mean something. We're not just throwing 2 guys together. The fights have to mean something. The Diaz fight, Diaz came off that incredible win over Donald Cerrone. He looked phenomenal, and he made a big splash in the 55-pound division. If he wins, he gets a title shot. And I love the Hendricks Koscheck fight, especially the storyline coming off of him knocking out his teammate. And we're telling 2 different types of stories in the Fox shows. You're going to see the story of the fight and what this fight means, why this fight is important to the division and to the sport, to the UFC, and who these guys are outside of the octagon.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.
Once again, it's star and 1 if you'd like to ask a question. Next, we'll go to the site of Cassie Wiseman from MMA Crossfire. Please go ahead.
Hi, yes, thank you guys for your time. The first question is going to go to Brian Stann. You've already kind of picked apart the Belcher and Paul Harris fight, but with regards to your personal interest, considering it's your weight class, which opponent would you prefer to fight?
It really doesn't matter. I think stylistically, obviously, Alan Belcher I match up better against. But at the same time, Rousimar Padajarez has got this great mystery around him, and a lot of people are afraid of him. And those are the types of fights that I actually enjoy taking. I like fighting the guys that nobody else wants to fight. So, but ultimately, you want to fight winners. So I would have no issues if 2 fights from now I fought the winner of this fight, because I think both of these guys are rapidly climbing the middleweight ladder. And a win, whoever wins that fight is possibly 1 more or 2 more fights away from a title shot. So it doesn't matter to me, which guy it would be. They're both. I've never seen either of them in a boring fight.
No, that's true enough. Next question is for Shanks and White. You guys, this is your 3rd time doing UFC on Fox, and it's a growing process and a learning process, of course, as you guys have mentioned. Just wondering, what's been the biggest lesson you've learned from the past 2 cards?
I think from our standpoint, it's just more action. I think that we've talked with Dana, and from the beginning, he said that the fans want more fights. We wanted the first one, that heavyweight fight, championship fight, to be a big event and kind of stand on its own. And I tell you, for a fight that went 64 seconds, getting almost 6 million people, it definitely did. But I think we've settled into what we think is going to be a good format, which is just a ton of action in the octagon. And I don't know, Dana, if you've got anything.
Yeah, I mean, we're a few months into a deal that's going to last 7 years. These guys are great at what they do. I think we're good at what we do, and we're in a very unique deal in that when Fox takes on all these other sports that you see on the network, they 100% control and film, do everything. All the sports that are on there, they control 100%. Now we got into this deal where we wanted to control the production, yet work with Fox to make this thing work for everybody and make the product as good as it could possibly be. And I think we're in a great place, just a few months into this relationship. It's coming together great, and I know how happy we are on this side, and we hope they're happy on that side too.
We're tickled.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Next, we'll take a follow-up from Sergio Non from USA Today. Please go ahead.
A question for Eric. You mentioned before that one of the things you're hoping to do is get more Fuel TV exposed to more people. Since you've started carrying UFC on Fuel TV, have you seen more interest in Fuel from cable and satellite providers?
I can definitely tell you the conversations are happening much more than they were when it was purely action sports. So the conversations are definitely happening. These things, getting more subs today is a really hard thing to do. I mean, you see a lot more contention now in conversations between cable companies and content companies. So the discussions don't happen quickly. But right now, having the UFC, there's much more of a reason to have those conversations. And believe me, cable companies' phones are ringing when we put prelims on Fuel.
All right, great, thank you.
Once again, please press star and 1 if you'd like to ask a question. Next, we'll go to the site for a follow-up with John Morgan from USA Today. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just a quick follow-up with Dana. Dana, I thought Eric answered very politically and eloquently earlier, but what do you expect out of the ratings this weekend now that you've got your 3rd show here on Fox?
Yeah, I don't ever really get into the whole ratings thing or how we're going to do, but one thing that I do love, I love the fact that we keep landing on these boxing dates. Mayweather and Cotto are going to fight that same night, and every time we've done this, in our lives, everybody has, you work all week, and then on your weekends you have limited time. You're going to go out with your family, you're going to take the girl out for dinner, you're going to do this. There's all these different things that you can do. On a Saturday night, when you have such a stacked night and you're a fight fan, you can stay home on Saturday night, watch the UFC for free on Fox, and then bounce over to pay-per-view and watch the Mayweather-Cotto fight the same night. That's why I think we really do so well on these nights. I love when boxing, and it always looks like we're competing and we're looking to go head-to-head. We're not head-to-head at all. We're going to go off before these guys even go on. So I think it works out perfect, and I'm very optimistic about Saturday.
I guess building on that, Dana, then would you ever target big boxing dates as the dates to do these, or does it just kind of work out that way?
Yeah, it's just kind of worked out this way. I haven't, when we sit down and go over the dates with Fox, you're always going up against something. There's always something that's going to take people's attention away from what you're doing, whether it's the hockey playoffs, the NBA, the this, the that. I mean, there's always something going on. So we do the best we can to maneuver around what's out there. But when we land on the big boxing dates, I think it works for us and it works for boxing. I mean, even for the guys, for Mayweather Cotto, whatever the UFC brings to the table for keeping men 18 to 34 home that night, those guys will migrate over to the pay-per-view after. I truly believe that.
Great. Thank you, Dan.
Yep, thank you.
Great. Now I'd like to turn the call back over to Eddie Model for some closing remarks.
That concludes today's call. Thanks a lot for everyone for joining us. A special thanks to Eric Shanks, Dana White, Brian Stann, and, of course, Kurt Menefee. See you guys all on Saturday night.